All right, welcome and Falcha. This is Random Thoughts from County Antrim on the 21st day of March 2020. And I'm your host, David McDonnell. I spent some time this week trying to figure out what I was going to do, what would be a good theme for this week's podcast. And I had some stories, I still have some stories that I've been meaning to tell, and I kind of thought this might be a good week to tell them. Then suddenly it dawned on me, this is still the week of St. Patrick's Day. And frankly, St. Patrick's Day this week was one of the strangest ones in my life. I didn't even leave the house the entire day. I did pour myself just a wee bit of Bushmills before I went to bed, but that was it. Past years, I always did something, even if it wasn't hanging out in the pubs, although I hung out in the pubs a fair amount of my lifetime. But I would at least, if I went to work, I'd at least wear a green tie, and often I had a green carnation. But this week, nothing, except for the Bushmills. I've seen some postings online, you may have seen them yourself, basically say, next year we need to celebrate St. Patrick's Day 3 days to take care of the lost St. Patrick's Day of 2020 and 2021. And I kind of chuckled when I saw those postings, because we indeed did lose a St. Patty's Day this year and last year. But I also chuckled for another reason, and that is St. Patrick's Day for me has never been a one-day celebration. It's usually been a week-long celebration. And I usually avoid the pubs on St. Patrick's Day itself because it's just too crowded. But that doesn't mean I don't celebrate that day and all week long. Pre-pandemic, I used to go on tour, and St. Patrick's Day would be a 3 or 4 week celebration. And I've come to know a lot of Irish musicians in my travels, and our tours overlap quite a bit. And we hung around. I hang around a lot with Irish musicians, and almost every one of them is out of work right now. And they haven't worked in over a year. There's just simply no gigs. And I had a conversation once with a musician who's from Ireland. Lives in New York now. And this conversation was a few years back before the pandemic. And he told me he had returned to Ireland in January and February to visit his family. And he booked a flight from Dublin to New York in late February. When he got on the plane, first thing he noticed, sitting right there, was a friend of his. They used to be in the same band together. And of course, the plane was crowded, so he didn't stop and chat, but he said hi and said, I'll talk to you later, and continued down the plane. And as he went to the next row, we saw another musician friend of his. And he kept doing this all the way down the plane till he got to his seat. He kept running into musicians who he either knew over the years or has performed with. And then he kind of realized, he said, this plane was probably 25% full of Irish musicians. And they were all on board from Dublin, heading for New York, the 3rd, 4th week in February. And from New York, he knew that they'd board planes and they'd go all over the place in the United States. Some would be going to the Midwest for a tour, some would be going to the South, some West, whatever. They each had loops booked for the 2 or 3 weeks leading up to and the week or so after St. Patrick's Day. And that's frankly how Irish musicians made their living. I mean, they'd perform gigs in Ireland when they could, but the most lucrative bookings, the time of year when American audiences, all American audience, want to listen to Irish music, is a week or so before St. Patrick's Day. And of course, that's gone last year and this year with the pandemic. Now, last year, it was early February. My wife and I went to a concert to see Karen Casey. If you haven't heard her, you should. She's the best. She's just superb. I've heard her before, but when I saw that she was doing a concert locally in northern Michigan, I just had to go, and my wife and I went, and we took our granddaughter. And our granddaughter is one of those people who cannot sit still when she listens to Irish music. I think it's in her DNA. She immediately started to dance, and she moved into the aisle and was dancing in the aisle through the whole performance. And Karen Casey actually loved it. She made comments about it several times during her performance about this beautiful young lass who was dancing through her songs. I'm telling you this because that concert in early February of last year, I think, was Karen Casey's last performance in that tour. And if not her last, it was one of the last. She had a several state, couple of month tour scheduled and planned throughout the Midwest. And at the time, the coronavirus was in the news. But this was about the time, her concert was about the time when everyone was beginning to realize that this damn thing was serious and contagious and dangerous. And countries around the world were closing their borders. Airlines were shutting down. And Karen must have figured, it's time to go home. If I don't go now, I may never get to go home. So she canceled the rest of her tour and flew back to her home in County Cork. Now, I described, I think, Ireland's level 5 lockdown a week or two ago at one of the podcasts. And Ireland's been in a level 5 lockdown, which is a very strict series of requirements. I think since December, when the virus cases spiked and went way up. It recently announced they're going to stay in level 5 at least through early April. And they're discussing how to gradually ease some of those restrictions. So they're still going to be at a pretty high level of alert and high level of restrictions, but maybe eased up a little bit. That's, of course, dependent on how quickly they get the vaccines in people and also the effect of these virus variants, which are pretty darn serious as well. But that's what our St. Patrick's Day celebrations have been like the last few years. It's just very, very slight. Now, when I do go on tour, which I often do in March, I often tell stories of St. Patrick, and I usually turn them into trivia contests. The winner doesn't really receive a prize, simply the pride at being the winner. Once in a while, if I'm at a pub, the proprietor will get the winner a free pint of Guinness. So I may do so I think what I'm going to do today is a St. Patrick's Day trivia contest. Since this is virtual, you will probably only receive a virtual prize. And I got a lot of trivia on St. Patrick, and I don't know if I can get through it all in the rest of this podcast. And if I don't, I'll just continue it, and that'll be my podcast next week. So keep track of your points. We'll add them to next week's trivia contest. So first of all, let me give you some background on St. Patrick. I'm going to tell you, first of all, everything, and I mean everything, that historians know, that is historical, verifiable information or evidence about St. Patrick. Everything. Well, that's it. That's everything we know about St. Patrick, in a nutshell. There's very little verifiable information that we know about St. Patrick. In fact, we don't even know how many there are. Now, the Annals of Ireland contains wonderful history of the Irish people. But the Annals weren't written until many centuries after St. Patrick had died. And there are many, many references to St. Patrick in the Annals, but these are based on oral histories, prior oral histories that were centuries old by the time they were written down for the first time. And how accurate are the annals in this regard? Who knows? Now, all we have in the way of contemporaneous records of St. Patrick are 2 letters that he had written. And one of them is somewhat autobiographical, so that gives us a great deal of information, actually. And that letter is in, one of those letters is in, the autobiographical letter is in Trinity College now, in the Trinity College Library. I don't think you could check it out, but it's in the library under seal, because it is actually, whatever that is, 1600 years old. And it's called St. Patrick's Confessio. And it was written sometime around the year 460, maybe a little later. And it's actually one of the oldest pieces of prose writing in Ireland. So it's a wonderful document, and it does give us a lot of information about St. Patrick. Now, I mentioned there were 2. So there's the Confessio at Trinity College. The other one is right here. I happen to have the only other letter written by St. Patrick, and I'm not even wearing white gloves. I probably should when I pick it up, but I'm careless in that regard. And I'm thinking about selling it, trying to raise some money during the pandemic. So I will probably list this on eBay, and I think I'll start the bidding at around $19.99, and then maybe I'll get a good price for it. Maybe enough to go out to dinner, now that we can actually go out to dinner in this pandemic. So other than this letter, what do we know about St. Patrick from his own autobiographical letter? Well, number one, he was a Briton. And lived somewhere, not sure by the description, it may be in what is now Wales, or may even be in the lowlands of Scotland, or it may have been the stretch of England in between. And the Britons were Celtic people, but they had become less Celtic in custom because they were subjected to the Roman invasion several centuries before. Around 43 AD is when the Romans came to Britain. And over time, the Britons became a little less Celtic than the Irish or the Scots or the Welsh. But among other things, the Romans brought Christianity to the Britons. And Patrick's parents were probably Christians. From some of the writings, it appears that they were. It's not at all clear whether Patrick was while he lived in Britain, because he was captured by Irish raiders when Patrick was about 15, 16 years old. And the literature usually describes the raiders as Irish pirates. That's a bit of a misunderstanding, I think, of some Celtic clan culture. The Celtic clans, and I probably should go over this in another podcast, but they were very close-knit communities. People within a clan felt a very great deal of loyalty and affinity and attachment to other people within their clan. But people in their clan didn't give a damn about anybody outside of their clan. Indeed, one of the favorite pastimes of Irish clans was to raid a neighboring clan. And the Annals of Ireland describe these clan raids. It was something like, the O'Neills raided the land of the O'Reillys and they took all the movables. Movables is one of my favorite phrases, favorite words in the Annals of Ireland, since it leaves so much to the imagination. And certainly the raiding clan would take cattle and sheep, probably pots and pans, and furniture or whatever else they could pick up and take with them. Movables sometimes referred to people. A neighboring clan, clan raiders may go to a neighboring clan and take people. And the clan that raided Britain, the Britain area where Patrick was, saw him as a movable, and they took him with him. Now, this raid was by the Irish to the land of the Britons which was across the Irish Sea. And the Irish weren't, by and large, seafaring people. They weren't like the Vikings, for example. So typically the raids were of the neighboring clan on land. But my clan, Clan Donald, actually I wrote a book about them over here, were a seafaring clan. They lived on both sides of the Irish Sea, both sides of the North Channel, and what is now Scotland and Ireland and the Hebrides Islands. And they were indeed a seafaring clan. And they lived in the north and northeast corner of Ireland, which is now County Antrim. And there's also some suggestion in some of the literature that when Patrick was taken by Irish pirates, he was taken to the land. The way they describe it sure sounds like County Antrim. So it was probably Clan Donald who hijacked young Patrick and took him to Ireland. So it's probably my ancestors who did that. I really don't have any evidence of that, but I don't have any evidence that it wasn't. But it also means I'm probably going to hell, but such as it is. In the literature, modern literature usually calls him a slave when he came to Ireland. And again, that's a bit of a misunderstanding of the Irish clan culture. He certainly was taken against his will, as many movables were. But the movables who were captured by an Irish clan generally weren't mistreated. Captured neighbors, captured clan members, they worked alongside members of the clan, and they doing whatever work had to be done. Slavery wasn't hereditary either. A slave or someone captured as a movable had some ability to move up the chain, either that generation or the next, into the normal life of members of the clan, and indeed become a functioning member of the clan. Now, Patrick was born somewhere around the year 390-ish. He was captured at 15 or 16. He spent 6 years as a shepherd in County Antrim, or wherever he happened to have been, which I believe was County Antrim. But then he had a vision. And he wrote that in his vision, he saw an angel. I should tell you that there is a variety of mushrooms in County Antrim which grow wild. And I must confess that I've taken a variety of mushrooms when I was a young man in the 1960s. And these mushrooms that I took just had a strange effect on the brain. Now, Patrick may or may not have eaten or smoked one of these mushrooms, but he had visions nevertheless. And in these visions, which he took to be angels, it told him to escape. And so he did. Now, I guess check my time. I got to figure out how many of these questions I'm going to ask in the trivia today or next week. But here's one. The vision told him to escape. So where do you think he went? Where did he go? I should play the theme of Jeopardy just to get you thinking. Well, the answer is France. He went to France. He walked from Northern Ireland all the way down the island to the southern coast, and then got on a boat and went to France. Now, once in France, he studied the priesthood and became an ordained priest. And as a priest, he then traveled around northern France for a while, but then made it back into Britain. And here's where he had another vision. And I don't know anything about the mushrooms in Britain, but he had a vision nevertheless. And in the vision, he heard a voice which said, "Come, walk with us." So where did Patrick go? Who was the us in the phrase, "Come walk with us"? Well, he went to Ireland, of course, and it was the Irish. But how did Patrick know that from this vision that he had and this voice that was speaking to him? Well, Patrick, as you might have guessed, he grew up as a Briton, and he spoke whatever language was the language of the Britons in that part of his island. He spent time in Ireland, and he spoke the language of the Irish for the years that he was there. Then he went to France, and he spoke the language of the people that lived in northern France at the time. I can't even tell you what those languages were in the 400s, whatever that is, the 5th century, early 5th century. And then as a priest, he certainly learned and spoke Latin. So when the voice said, "Come walk with us," what made him go to Ireland? Well, the vision and the voice that he heard was speaking the Irish language. And so from that, Patrick knew he had to go to Ireland. So he did. Now, there's often accounts today about how St. Patrick was sent there by the Pope. But he wasn't. He was sent there by his own vision. But those who think he was sent by the Pope may be a little confused, and I'll get to that in a minute. But Patrick certainly went there on his own accord, right? Perhaps even because of the mushrooms. But certainly because he had a vision. Now, he spent about 30 years or more in Ireland. According to legends, which is mostly true, I'm sure, he traveled around the island. He baptized people. He ordained priests. He started monasteries, dedicated cemeteries, and then he died in the late 400s. But did he introduce Christianity to Ireland? Often said that he did. Did he? The answer is no. There were priests and bishops already in Ireland. Difference is they were largely in the minority. Christianity was taking hold in Ireland, but it was still the minority. But by the time Patrick died, virtually everyone in Ireland was a Christian. I think I only have time for one more. There's a whole bunch of these questions I'm going to ask, but I don't think I have time. So let me ask you this one. How many St. Patricks were there? I hinted at this already. The answer is probably 2. There was a man named Palladius, an Italian, who lived in Rome, and probably Italian, but he lived in Rome. And he was sent to Ireland by the Pope to administer the Catholic Church in Ireland. And there were already Christians in Ireland at the time, as well as some priests and bishops. But Palladius was sent there anyway by the Pope, kind of to expand the church that was already there. Now, related to that, what was Patrick's name? Not Palladius, but the second Patrick. What name was he given by his mom and dad? Hint, it was not Patrick. His name was maywen Sukkot. Now, how did maywen become Patrick? And what does that have to do with Palladius? Well, the word patricius in Latin at the era meant honorable or noble, maybe even holy, but just sort of a respectable, honorable man. And it was the title which would have been applied to Palladius when he arrived at Ireland, sent there by the Pope. He certainly would have been called or referred to as Patricius. Now, when Patrick arrived, the Briton, a generation later, he too might have been called Patricius, because he too was a quite honorable, noble man, performing good deeds. So whenever he roamed around Ireland, Patricius, he was referred to as Patricius. And in English, that translates to Patrick. So the second Patrick, the man we usually refer to as St. Patrick, might have deserved sainthood, probably did, But he also may have been given credit for the work done by the first Patricius, the first Patrick. That's probably a good thing he became known as Patrick. Otherwise, we'd be celebrating Maywen Sukkot Day today. And we would have millions of Irish and Irish descendants who, instead of be calling Patrick, would be called Maywen. All right, I think I got another room for another one. Which pope named Patrick a saint? We all know the popes designate certain people as saints. Which one named Patrick a saint? And the answer is none of them. During the first millennium or so, popes didn't name saints. Sainthood was purely a local thing. If the locals prayed to someone or the memory of someone and something good happened, the locals would make him a saint. It wasn't until the second millennium that the Vatican brought this whole sainthood thing in-house. And since then, only the Pope can name someone as a saint. So no Pope named Patrick a saint. The people of Ireland did. Now, why do we celebrate St. Patrick's Day on March 17, you might ask? Well, presumably that's the day St. Patrick died. And which is kind of weird on one hand, because why would we celebrate the death of an honorable man or a noble man? You should celebrate the death of somebody despicable. We should celebrate the death of Adolf Hitler. Why do we celebrate the death of St. Patrick? Well, it was years ago, centuries ago, that the church decided we ought to celebrate, not so much celebrate, but honor the death of St. Patrick. So it wasn't a day of celebration. It was supposed to be a day of contemplation and reflection, another day of prayer. The church evidently thought we needed yet another day of prayer, another day of contemplation in the spring as we're approaching Easter. So March 17th was randomly picked by the church as the date of death of St. Patrick and a day to be honored. So when did St. Patrick die? Really? Was it March 17th? The answer is we don't have a frickin' clue. We don't even know the year of his death, although we're pretty sure we know the decade of his death, but certainly not the date. All right, I promised that I would keep these down to 30 minutes each, and I'm almost there, and I got a whole bunch of more questions. So keep track of your score of how many of those trivia questions you got right. We're going to do part 2 of St. Patrick a week from tonight. I have a bunch of other trivia questions, some interesting tidbits about St. Patrick and St. Patrick's Day, and we'll go through those next week. So in the meantime, take a look at my website, take a look at my books, By the Horse of Guinness in Clandano. My website is clandano.net. Send me an email at clandano@gmail.com. Like and share me on Facebook. Buy one of my books. Then I won't have to sell my valuable piece of parchment, which was handwritten by St. Patrick himself. In the meantime, I'll see you next week. Goodbye.